It was something I've been paying attention to because it's an interesting story of these top European clubs looking to break away and it really just create a separate league. Sort of, it's almost I don't know if their intention was to leave the Champions League, but it was to create a permanent Champions League that goes on. I think it was Wednesday nights they were advocating. And you shared with me, it was Gary Neville, I think, was the most emphatic about his views on it. I can't share the whole thing, but I found the one most interesting part that I will share. I'm sure Sky will copyright claim this and we won't be able to air it, but I'm just going to play this bit here. And let me, oh, balls. I don't think I shared the volume, did I? 1 second. It's been a while since we shared video. I'm a bit rusty.
That's fine. No, his rant was outstanding. Like I'm trying to remember what the game was now on that last Sunday when he was. This kind of news broke as the game was playing, and then he went on a bit of a rant about it. And I love a Gary Neville rant, I've got to say.
Yeah, so this was the bit where he was really just sort of taking it home, and this was when he was talking about what he thinks should happen.
To stamp on this is it's criminal. It's a criminal act against football fans in this country. Make no mistake about it. This is the biggest sport in the world. This is the biggest sport in this country, and it's a criminal act against the fans. Simple as that. Deduct points, deduct their money, and punish them.
Do you think they?
So that was Gary Neville, and I saw this, and I saw not too long after that, I saw a Chinese football fan being interviewed about how he was really excited about the Super League. Just to add some sort of context to it. I'm not sharing my opinion. This is just me sharing what I saw. And this Chinese fan was a fan of European football, and he was excited about the prospect of seeing these teams play week in and week out, which is another point of view. I'm curious what you think. I kind of know what you think, but I want to hear you sort of contextualize your thoughts on this.
So I don't have the level of understanding of what goes into this type of thing that Gary does. And he was bringing up points as like, oh, okay, I wasn't kind of fully aware of some of the points that he made out. Like initially, like, oh, this is interesting. Like, where does this lead? And then you're thinking, oh, it might actually mean leaving the Champions League and leaving the Premier League. And then you've got these fixed teams doing that. And they're all just playing each other. There's no relegation. There's no tournament. It's kind of like I thought quite early on, oh God. And I'm a Man United supporter. So my team was in the mix with this.
Yeah.
And quite early on there, I just was not interested and really hoped that was not the case. And then hearing the Premier League stance on it, or the FA stance on it, saying, the Premier League are going to vote on it, they could be kicked out. I was like, Jesus Christ! Like I'm gonna have to support another team. I don't think I can back this. I fundamentally just didn't want to stand for it. Like I heard an interview in more depth where they were suggesting that basically these rich owners from abroad that haven't been brought up with football over here want certainty. So they want to be able to create something where they have a certain amount of revenue, whether they win, lose, or draw, or whatever. Whilst what's happening in the Champions League, there is shitloads of money if you're successful. But like Liverpool at the moment, who won the league last year and looked phenomenal, are really struggling for a number of reasons this year. They may not get into the Champions League this year, and that's going to cost them. So they're trying to create more certainty with breaking off. And actually, I just don't believe it's in the spirit of sport. Like, to get shitloads of money for something guaranteed, you're not going to have the same passion behind it. With this Chinese fan who was looking forward to the best of Europe, mate, don't worry about it. You already got that with the Champions League. That's the cream of the crop. They've earned to be there, and it's a knockout tournament. The best stay in. It's, in my opinion, that it is the greatest form of football in the entire world. The World Cup doesn't even come close to it, because these guys are paid thousands and thousands of pounds, millions of pounds, training every single day, and you have a coach with them all the time. Internationals can't compete with that because they only get floated in every couple of months. You can't create a team and have a fully connected team like you can with a whole league season. So for that reason, the Champions League for me is the ultimate football competition. And when you watch a game like, I don't know if you saw it, the first leg of PSG versus Bayern Munich, I mean, it was two of the best teams in Europe going at each other, going for the throat, amazing football. They were like, I think Bayern had 30 shots on goal. It was unbelievable. It was so exhilarating. And that is what had made me fall in love with football. So I am very glad that it all fell through, and I'm really happy with the Premier League and Champions League as it is.
Yeah, I coming from America, so as an American, I'm going to push back a little bit because I don't think that having a league where there's no relegation means you're going to have a product that people are less passionate about. And if you look at NFL, MLB, American sports, people are almost religious about their teams. And I would say that, let's say, coming from Philadelphia, which is quite a zealous sporting city where they're supporting teams that aren't being relegated, I don't think that's necessarily it or the issue. But I will say that it is problematic from a competition standpoint, because the first thing that I think you have to have a problem with is that these teams are going somewhere where they're guaranteed more money in a competition. They're more money in a competition where business is sort of paramount. How well your business is run is how well you're going to put a product on the field to the most degree. And that's not fair to other teams in the Premier League that won't have this option, because it's sort of ring fenced off from these teams. And the other contradiction about this whole thing, the teams that have been invited in, the whole idea is we want to see the best of the best. And like you said, and I think even Gary Neville said, Arsenal, Man United, they're not in the Champions League. It's like we're not even. And what has Tottenham really won recently to earn
the way they're playing?
Yeah. So what they've invited is they've invited the teams that have the most resource to spend money on
Correct.
the top players.
Correct.
And they wanted to create this, and this is where the Premier League has a bit of a problem, or fans of the Premier League have a bit of a problem, because this league, above any other league in the world, supports businesses operating as independent entities within this sort of Premier League structure. And I don't agree with it, and I think it was the wrong thing to do. I think it was stupid. But at the same time, we can't be surprised that businessmen are trying to make decisions to better their investment. And that's what this is at the end of the day. It's businessmen looking at these, for all the fans' love of Man City and their owners coming in and just putting money into this product to make a better return. It's not that dissimilar in many ways to trying to create a super league. But it is. Yeah, go right ahead.
I was going to say, so this is where I really take on Gary Neville's perspective, because he's a Man United fan, and everyone knows that. He's a red through and through. So if anyone, you'd think that he might be biased towards that. His club are involved with that, and he's saying hammer them, fine them, drop points, relegate them, do whatever, throw the book at them. So, and I love that. He understands. He's also a club owner, so he owns a stake in Salford Football Club. So he understands. He's been a player, like a career player from youth all the way through, captain, play for England. He's there now, a chairman. He understands the whole tier of it. And watching him talk, like what Gary's done, I think it was maybe the start of last season. He was saying how he thinks it's disgusting the way the Premier League isolate the lower leagues, and there should be more of a threshold for payment. So rather than the massive payments for the top five, there should be a bit less, because they earn more money in the other tournaments anyway, and it should be more evenly distributed to the lower teams to help them out to grow the game. So he's someone that sees it from a perspective of, like, I'm a businessman in Salford, but I'm also trying to do it for the game. And we need to really listen to people like that. So he's looking at it from a really balanced perspective. I do take your point. I can't disagree from it from a business perspective, but we need to hold on to it. And I'm really glad with the reaction and the way within a matter of days with the outroar, they did a U-turn on it, and I think it's the right call. Ultimately, I think it's where sports is at its best. I would agree with you that the Six Nations and also the Autumn Internationals, rugby union in general, as well as cricket, would argue, hang on a minute here, there's only like 6 teams that are really competitive. The rest aren't worth, you could argue there's a lot less competition lower down the list, but you've got the Southern Hemisphere. There's only like 4 teams in it, I think. You got, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and there's a new one. Is it Fiji that have gone in? Oh, Argentina have just been brought into it, and they play every year. So there's only 4 teams. There's no relegation, but that's about as competitive as you can get. So I think there are examples out there. I think that's very fair to say, but I think we have to acknowledge the point that you made as well, that if they're getting guaranteed payment, Are they going to have the level of desire that a club that's going to be relegated and lose millions will against defend in the last few games of the season? That passion, it's not going to be there to the same extent. Is it going to be competitive? Absolutely. But I don't believe when you've got relegation on the line and going through to a Champions League spot, like that key stage is, I don't think you can quite compete on that level. And that's where the English Football League has an advantage over a lot of other sports.
I don't agree. So I don't agree with I'm glad. I am in full agreement with you on the Super League. I think it was this biggest contradiction. I think my point was more, I look at the Premier League from somebody who's come at it in the last 15 years. And there's certain decisions that people are making where you're trying to parse this whole pure pyramid system. But then you also have this other side of it that I see, which is this massive business that charges a shit ton of money for a product, a massive product. And for me, I'm not surprised that this, was attempted. This isn't like a big,
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, of course they're doing this. You're giving them freedom to work as a business, which from an American standpoint, we have teams that are owned, but they're somewhat more regulated because they're part of a franchise. They're a franchise in part of a bigger group. And what I will push back on is, when you, again, looking at American sports, and I've been a fan of Aston Villa and the Philadelphia Eagles, and I don't see a difference in how much it means to the players and how much it means to the fans. So I don't think that's the case. But I think the way this product was packaged would be kind of a limp dick product, because they would be just in this competition on Wednesdays, and they would be, yeah, of course they want to win this, but they're also Champions League. They wanted to have everything. And it was just going to be a big, just sort of sloppy mess of rich people football. And it wasn't going to be that interesting, really. So I don't even think the product was going to be that great. And the Premier League is protecting its investment by saying, fine, you go do that and you're out of this. And I think a lot of fans would have, it's a weird one because clubs like Manchester United would have survived. Let's say this goes ahead and these clubs just leave the Premier League and they start their own product. They're probably going to be fine, but it's going to be such a shitty product. I'd be curious to see what would have happened in the Premier League if that happened. I don't know that it would have been allowed to, but they have such an international following. There's a lot of people like myself who I'm new to pyramid football, relatively speaking, in the last 15 years. There's a lot of people in America and in Asia and in Australia that don't probably understand, why this is such a bad thing, because, the Premier League has always been a worldwide business and they don't see it in the same way. They don't understand the relegation and promotion aspect. And I see that, and I see the value in that, but that's very specific to this sort of, structure, this football league structure in Europe specifically and in England.
Yeah, it is. And I know still, I can push back. I'm not suggesting that the need to win in American football isn't that, like, I know they're going to be super competitive, but the thing is, if they lose, they lose, and they have to live with that, which is difficult enough. I appreciate, and that's enough to force anyone to fight. But once you lose and you'll get relegated to another league, and then you're going to lose sponsorships, you lose millions of pounds of opportunity. You're playing against an inferior competition for an entire year, which is the Championship is such a tough league. You've got to battle and scrap every single week to try and get your ass back in again. It is not the same. It's the same as saying, you can lose, a football match versus getting in a fight. There's a it isn't just a loss. You have your manhood taken away from you. And as a team, there is something, I wouldn't say you lose your manhood, but there's a devastation, not just financial, yes, but not just that. It's like psychologically, you've got to work for an entire year to get back to this again. To hopefully, because you may be in here like a lot of teams have never got back. Like Nottingham Forest, a massive club, has not been back in the Premier League. Like the impact is massive. So and then you lose players like. Jack Grealish could have got, like, your captain, your main superstars, they leave. It's just, so I think I still stand by my point. I'm not, I think that my point could come across as I'm putting down sports like rugby or American football. I'm not meaning to, but I think that when you have a loss, something that you're relegated, that level is unique. And I think it does inspire a different level of anticipation and excitement, nervousness, there's a different form of excitement when it comes to the end of the season. You've got the top of the table clash, the European spots, and then you've got the relegation, and it's frenetic. And you then have the opposite side where you get clubs coming up, so they get the feeling you've got these clubs that in the Championship have like they've their day at Wembley. They get to go in the Wembley Stadium, score a goal to get taken up to the Premier League, and they win it's like you win in the lottery, although it's that kind of very humble grassroots kind of feel, and that goes all the way down to divisions. So I do stand by. I think it's so unique, and I absolutely love that. That's what I kind of love about football.
I like that too, and and that's where I think what I'm debating is the better thing, because not everything is better in English football, in my view. And this is somebody who loves English football. So in English football, you have a lot of games for a lot of teams in the middle of the table who aren't going to get promoted and aren't going to get relegated. And they're not in cup games, and they're just playing for points and pride. And, there's not a lot in it for some of the games. When you start getting into sort of March, April, May, you watch it because you want to see your team win. You love football. I still love watching Villa games, but they're not as meaningful because the gulf in talent in the Premier League is so massive. And I think the suggestion Gary Neville made is incredible. I love the idea of being able to resource these lower level teams to be more competitive. Because when you get Man City versus Sheffield United, it's like, okay, we know City's going to win. It's kind of a foregone conclusion. It's one of my problems with F1. I want to like F1 that much more. I wish F1 was more structured like Indy cars, where everybody was, had the same stock equipment that engineers had to make work. It was a bit of a MacGyver job. But you always have Lewis Hamilton and the best car winning. And it's like, you get more excited when there's competition. And I think sometimes the Premier League suffers from the fact that business is a bit too king in the league. And in the NFL, you have games that are more meaningful longer into the season and much more competitive. It's a bit less of a surprise when you have a shittier team beating a top team. And in the Premier League, it's like, wow, that was totally unexpected. And it's
you think so? So you think it's... you see, I wouldn't have thought that. I know. I'll speak from football, English football terms, and the Premier League is touted for this. So if you look in Germany, France, and Spain, Italy as well, the standard of the lower leagues, the lower people in their top league, is nowhere near the standard of a gritty Premier League team. Like you're gonna get a battle. So if you're Liverpool, Man United, Man City, every away game. Like the game today, Man United against Ellen Road. Thank God there are no fans in the stadium, because that would have been horrendous. That they hate each other. They would have been on United players' back. To try and go there and get result is a absolute nightmare. And I think generally speaking, you've got your Man City's on form at the moment. You can't see losing any. Man United are on a good run, but really any team can beat anyone. And I don't know how that compares to American football, because I'm not as much of a follower. But what I would support you on, mate, is I love the grandstand finish to American sports, the playoffs. I think actually, especially now when Man City have kind of won, it's lost a bit of momentum for the title, right? It's now, okay, it's more exciting to see who gets maybe European football, who doesn't get relegated. And I support you. I think to make the Premier League even better, you should have the top 4 or top 8, and then they go into that playoff thing that, going against each other. Man City are the favourites. They've looked outstanding, but will they do it across 3 legs or 5 legs or whatever? Yeah. And that to me is like the best of both worlds then.
I agree. And that may be the differentiator, because I'm not, the way I'm painting it is I don't think the product is boring for the Premier League. I just think when you look at, when Villa were sort of not getting relegated, not getting promoted, there was a point where I was just watching games to watch games. They weren't in a cup. They weren't going to get relegated. They weren't going to compete for Champions League. And there's a part of me that's like, I could go out and play a round of golf. I'll watch, but if somebody wants to go out and play golf, I'll probably do that. Whereas with an Eagles game, no, I'm not golfing today. The Eagles are on. That's something important may happen here. Now, Villa win a game so right now, Villa are probably in that space now where they're losing enough games where they're not going to get relegated.
You're saying they're not going to, but you're not pushing enough to be in
so
Champions
right now, if you ask me to go golfing tonight when Villa are playing, or is it this afternoon when Villa are playing? See, I've golfed today. I don't even know when Villa are playing. And Villa fans are going to watch this and say, you're not a real fan. Fair enough. Fine. I'm not a real fan. I support your team. I pay money to go to the games. I, watch all the results. And, I'm a fan as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But if I compare it to, let's say, my time watching the Eagles, I have to watch that game because it's more times than not more meaningful than the Villa game. And I don't mind watching the replay.
And I understand your point there, mate.
And that's for me the bit that I think, what you said about having maybe more of an American style, playoff structure. I think that's in America, you have that's everything. You don't have all these little cups on the side. So you have all these little consolation prizes. So not that it is that way, but that's what it looks like to an American. The FA Cup, okay, for a team like Villa, that's a consolation prize because they're not going to be able to compete in the Premier League title. They're not going to be able to get into the European, they're not going to be relegated. And there's interest at the bottom of the table, when you don't get relegated. And I've been in that. That was an exciting year when Villa didn't get relegated. As much as I hated it, it was fun.
Yeah, it was exactly. Every game is so important, right? Every point
that getting promoted was incredible. So there's so much value, and the games can be way more meaning than that of American sport. But when you have that one meaningful Super Bowl competition, that means everything to these players, and these players may never get a chance to win a Super Bowl. Getting into that game, it's that's where those differences are. And I think that your suggestion might be a good way to maybe bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah, it's never going to happen, but I would back that. I would love to see that. Even if United were undefeated, 20 points in the lead, and then they got to go into a tournament. It's not always the case. The best team is going to go on, like we saw in the NFL last year, like you said, because I'm undefeated in my picks in the NFL. I don't know if you remember.
You are, yeah.
But, I backed the Buccaneers, and they were not the favourites going into it, and yet they won. So I kind of like that. You get who's the best man on that day, kind of showing up, and it's very similar to the fight game as well, right? It's not necessarily the best fighter wins; it's just the best fighter on the night, that moment.
Leicester City that year they won the Premier League was one of the most exciting seasons I can ever remember.
That was unbelievable.
Or City winning against United in the. So apologies for bringing that up, but winning, that was. I don't care if you're a United fan. That was unbelievable.
No, you can't deny that. You can't deny the fact that for them, for the first league that they won that, and the way in which it was done, and it must have been unbelievable for the fans.
That to me, I think that is probably, and I say this about American sport, preaching its virtues as a sport, which is not perfect. The NFL is far from perfect, but that finish to a Premier League season was probably one of the greatest finishes to a league season in any sport that I can think of. I can't think of a season ending in that way, last minute goal scored to win the title. It was incredible.
What? If the timing's right and it's done like that, it's spectacular. I think the thing that you can say in defense of the Premier League kind of setup is that, unlike in the American sports, we know who the best team of the league is. You cannot fluke a Premier League. There's no got lucky shot. Wei Li Zhang, I got knocked out. She, got lucky. Something, happened. There's just no excuse for it. The best team that you cannot fluke 38 games. So at least we know who the best team is in that league for that year. That is that. So they deserve that, and to win the Premier League is maybe less exciting, but it's one of the most sought after prizes in football because you know that you've had to grind it out for 38 games. So I suppose that's maybe the caveat to it from a purist sport perspective. We know who the best is, but then it doesn't compete with the excitement like we see on the Champions League nights where. It's the best over two legs, which are probably the best team, but it doesn't always work like that. You get an early goal, you win 1-0, and then you cling on for a 0-0 second leg and you're through. But, it's the excitement in those games, similar to the American playoffs, is just through the roof.
Yeah, and I think the Champions League is the closest thing you're going to get to, in some degree, to the NFL. Because if you lose, or if you don't make Champions League football, like for United, it sucks, but it's not devastating.
Shit. It is shit, mate. Because the Europa, is a fucking joke. It is a joke. How can you be knocked out of a tournament and be put into another tournament and have any credibility whatsoever? So the fact that we're saying, we're going on to win the UEFA, it's still a credible cup. It's not a fucking credible cup. Because we got knocked out to get into it. So it doesn't mean shit. It's the teams that are 5th and 6th and 7th going in there. That speaks volumes itself. And you get in there if you get knocked out of the Champions League. It's the kind of, it's the plate, it's the backup, it's the, It's not a now. Look, for those mid-tier teams, maybe like Villa in this situation that you've explained, mid-tier, you've got something to go into and fight for. Yeah, okay, but let's not just stand around and say this. It's an unbelievable achievement, because it isn't. Yes.
Is that a British view, though? Because I don't think the rest of
it's
Europe.
a huge view.
Europe,
I don't know if anyone else agrees with me.
The United fan view too, because I don't think I don't like the fact that Champions League losers go into Europa League. I don't like that.
No,
and the one thing that they did start doing, which I think is really good, is the fact that you can qualify for the Champions League through the Europa League. I think that's 100% correct. And
now that I can understand.
Yeah,
that I think you've earned your spot. It's like a promotion from a tournament. I support.
Yeah,
but to get knocked out of one to go into the other does shame me another sport that does that. You can't have any credibility in it. No, mate, I think it's my view. I don't know, other people and footballers would say how great the Europa League is, but I do not.
But I think that's a top 5 fan view as well. Because I think if you look at an Everton, they're not going to thumb their nose at. The only reason
that's fair.
People below the top 5 fans, or fans from the top 5 teams, don't like Europa League is how stupid the Premier League is with scheduling around Europa League's fixtures. They don't give a shit about seeing Premier League teams do well in Europe, and they'll schedule, like, if you have a match on Saturday and you got a Thursday.
It's a joke.
They just don't care. It's just we're not going to change the schedule.
Something's got to give.
I always wondered if the Champions League could be expanded so that instead of having because what makes it a bit weird is you have 2 different competitions, and the teams that are in the Europa League are not bad teams, even before the knockouts.
They're not
the Champions League.
Bad teams. No, they're not bad. They're just not the best.
But I wonder if it would be worthwhile to even expand the Champions League and make that Europa League redundant, have a much larger European competition where more teams have a chance to compete in those round robin.
I would only change the fact that if you get knocked out of the Champions League, you don't go into Europa. I think you're out of the Champions League. That's it. And those people that qualified, rightfully so, that are mid-tier. Look, you can go from the Championship. Usually, the people that get going from the Championship to the Premier League, their goal is survival. That's that. They just want to stay in the Premier League. Now, imagine if one of those can get into Europa and play an AC Milan, still a club with great history, playing in the San Siro stadium. I think it's unbelievable for those teams. Yes, I am speaking biasly from a top tier team, and I'm looking at the pinnacle, the best, which is the Champions League. And if we get knocked out of that, which we did, and we deserve to be knocked out, we do not deserve to be pushed into another tournament, like at someone else's expense. I think that you're out of that tournament and that's it. I wouldn't change anything else. I think having another cup for they're not middle tier teams, are they? They're the outside the top 4. They're 5th, 6th, 7th teams. That it's a reputable tournament. It's just let's not kid ourselves and put it anywhere. It is a distinct level down, and maybe even a couple of levels down from Champions League. And for any clubs outside of the top 4, that's worth fighting for sure. But I don't think I would change anything else. Just the support of the Premier League with the fixtures and making sure it's a Sunday only game, which they have done for United since, to be fair. So you've got those 3 days rest.
The Europa League may be a bigger deal than I think it is. The more I think about it, the more I would really like to see just top 6 teams into a European, mega tournament. The more I think about it, the more I love that idea. Now, that's not knowing. I'm not. To anybody who's going to give me shit about this, I don't know enough about the Europa League to know whether this is like the FA Cup, something that will always have to be there, and there's a reason for that for other countries. I like the idea of seeing a top 6 in every league just competing in a tournament. That's sort of bringing together the best of what we talked about with American sports with European football and seeing these stadiums. I wouldn't
disagree with it. I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be against that either. Again,
it's just 2 competitions. Sorry, Hugo.
No, because I don't watch Europa, and with United, it's kind of like a reluctant watch sometimes, and you know that they're tired, and it impacts the game on the weekend, and they're rested in the first few games. You don't rest for Champions League; they get their best players in there. Europa teams sometimes they rest to start with, so it's like that kind of speaks volumes. So either eradicate the whole, if they eradicate the whole thing, it would make no difference to me at all. And if they extended the Champions League to do that, I wouldn't feel that anything less of the Champions League. It's just now you've got some more teams to contend with. The difference between finishing 4th and 5th in the Premier League does not equal great to shit in any means. So you're still going to have your work cut out. I just love the tournament basis, and I just not a fan of a second tier tournament. The truth is I can't get excited about it. Is how because the Champions League is there. How can I?
Yeah, and that for me is why I think to have top 6 in every league competing, in sort of a European competition. I love that because 6th place is attainable for those teams that are middle of the road who aren't going to win a title, but may be good enough to compete, maybe good enough to pull Leicester in the Champions League, or at least have their day out, earn that 6th place, makes the rest of the Premier League competition interesting. And I'm sure the same for Italy and Spain. But I think the other issue with Europa League is it is kind of a booby prize for those teams that are used to competing in the Premier League. And it has to be looked at as a consolation prize because it is the second best or the second tier of these teams that aren't able to play in the Champions League. And I think that really devalues the competition.
Now, the one thing I don't know here, what the eligibility is across Europe. I know where it stands in Britain, but I don't know where it stands in the rest of Europe. But what I do know is that it's not the top 4 teams in all leagues at all. Actually, Britain, unsurprisingly so, has I think the highest allocation because our league is so difficult to win. And I think that just sums it up actually. But if you have a look, let's say across Turkey, it's not the top 4 teams in Turkey that are going into it. And there's no disrespect to Turkey, I'm just plucking out of the air. They're not renowned to be one of the top European leagues. It's the same as Sweden. You don't have the top 4 teams in Sweden in the Champions League because the 4th team, there's such a gulf between them and United's, Barcelona's, that there's a different tiering system. So I believe that if you win in a smaller league, which I'm not going to name anymore, I think you have to go into the qualifying process. Before you get into the group stage. So if you win top 4, you go automatically into group stage in the British league. In other leagues, you may win that league, and I'm sure you don't walk into the Champions League. I think you may still have to qualify based on how reputable that league is. So that I believe will be, and this is a total assumption, Sean, but this is where I think the Europa comes in. Where it has more of a standing, so that they have the opportunity to play in Europe, and it covers that. It closes the gap actually between winning a league, being dominant in your national league, versus going against the cream of the crop in Europe. So there's still an opportunity, but you've got to earn your way in, and this Europa is a way that they can kind of just bridge that gap somehow. So. Maybe there is a space for it that we're just. I know that I am really overlooking because of where my team is, and just looking at the Man United vision rather than these other countries.
Yeah, I look at it from somebody who supports the Villa here and somebody who's an American who's come over here, and I kind of want more people to either embrace the Europa League or it to just not. It's one of the two. I'd rather people are all in or not. And it's this weird in between space of we kind of like it, we kind of don't. I don't know. It's hard for me to get into, and I would be really happy to see Villa make European football. That's something that Villa haven't done since I first started following Villa. But even then, like I kind of don't want to watch Villa in Europe if, let's say, we're sitting people so that we can be competitive in the Premier League because we only have 2 days rest. It's just so counterintuitive to competition.
I agree.